saying this. So I just came. Did you ask what Rasul said? Did you ask who he was sitting behind that desk, representing, and upholding the laws of Allah? Now give me a reason which is being said by somebody. Who is this there? Are you telling me? Why don't you tell me what Allah is saying? What Rasul is saying? You see, I didn't think about it. When I said go back, he went back, he was given 15,000. When he mentioned like that, he helped him, and he must give it was entering water, rain, and the book taken by me, and everything. Even during the day now, sweeping it away. So then you have to have something. Of course, that's Amana. If Allah Ta'ala told you, that's you just have to. Not you sin.
Bismillah, read.
Not what the government is saying, not what
على ربهم يتوكلون الذين يقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم
Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah, with the grace of Allah Ta'ala, we finished the last verse. We're moving to a new verse today, inshallah. We are busy with Surah Anfal, right? And the new verse we're doing is verse number 2, né? Right? So the last verse we done was with regards to the dividing of the Anfal, the dividing of the Fay, etc., etc. Right? And we gave you the different explanations. So the new verse, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, إنما المؤمنون الذين إذا ذكر الله وجلت قلوبهم وإذا تليت عليهم آياته زادتهم إيمانا وعلى ربهم يتوكلون الذين يقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقنا ينفقون أولئك هم المؤمنون حقا لهم درجات عند ربهم ومغفرة ورزق كريم. Translated as follows, that certainly the believers are those whose hearts are filled with fear. Right? The true believers are those whose hearts are filled with fear. When the name of Allah is mentioned and in whose verses are recited before them, they increase their faith in their Lord, and in Him do they place their trust. Right? You got a translation. Right? Certainly the believers are those people whose hearts are filled with fear. Those whose hearts are filled with fear when the name of Allah Ta'ala is mentioned. Alladhina, right? إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ, when the name is mentioned, وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُم, their hearts tremble. Right? وَإِذَا تُلِيَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُهُ, and when his verses are recited, زَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا, increases them in iman. وَعَلَى رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ, and then they place their trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So, in this is a beautiful verse. You can give a whole Jummah bayan on this. You can give or if you are Afa that is doing the Talim, etc., etc., you can give a whole Talim on this. What can you do, Luqman? You can give this, Ismail. If I was you, I'll make a note. Next time I'm looking for bayan, next time they call me there, I'm sick, I don't come to madrasa, but I'm strong enough to give bayan. You just make a note of this. Sometimes some students are sick. They can't come to madrasa, but they can give bayan. But remember, I told you that when we were studying in the Darul by Mufti Siraj, so the Muazzin wasn't there. So Mufti Sahab told the one brother, he must go give azan with the mic. So he was afraid to give. He said, Mufti Sahab, my toe is sore. Give azan. Mufti Sahab said, are you going to give azan with your toe or what? Are you going to give azan with your toe or do you give azan with your right? So next time you are sick, you can't come to madrasa, but they call you emergency, you must come give bayan, you have a masjid taqwa, then you can give you can give our own life bayan upon this. Like you know the other verse, the famous was قد أفلح المؤمنون الذين هم في صلاتهم خاشعون والذين هم عن اللغو معرضون والذين هم لفروجهم حافظون إلا على أزواجهم أو ما ملكت أيمانهم فإنهم غير ملومين فمن ابتغى وراء ذلك فأولئك هم العادون. Remember that verse? You can give a whole bayan on that. Same thing here. This is one of those unique verses where you can give a whole bayan, right? So, in this particular verse, particular attributes of the believer described in the verses cited above are particular attributes which should be the hallmark of every believer. So, this should be the outstanding and the hallmark, right? Should be the thing by which you recognize a believer. The hint given here is every believer should be checking on his or his physical and spiritual condition and assess if these attributes are present in his or her person. Subhanallah. So from this hadith, from what Mufti Sahib is saying is very, very interesting. Like you know, you like how you mashallah, you are a jigaleza, isn't it? You are jigal. What are you? Uber driver. What are you? Transporter. You every year you try to improve. You start with the old Bakia Skodoings, but what you driving now? What is he driving now? Tidia. What is driving? So you're always looking out. How are you improving yourself? Are you stagnating? Are you on the same place where you were a few years ago? Or are you improving yourself? Are you coming closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So here Mufti Sahib mentions also something very, very interesting. He say, look here, all these qualities that he mentioned, like قد أفلح المؤمنون الذين هم في صلاتهم خاشعون والذين هم عن اللغو معرضون والذين هم للزكاة فاعلون والذين هم لفروجهم حافظون إلا على أزواجهم أو ما ملكت أيمانهم فإنهم غير ملومين. All those, we as believers, we have to always be looking at ourselves and evaluating ourselves. To what extent do I have this quality in me? To what extent do I have this quality in me? This is a quality which, like how we just one we done that, mashallah, this beautiful verse, Alladhina, was it one? إن الذين اتقوا إذا مسهم طائف من الشيطان تذكروا فإذا هم مبصرون وإخوانهم يمدونهم في الغي ثم لا يبصرون. Right? That one. When they get a touch of shaitan, when the shaitan afflict them, and إذا مسهم. So we have to, in order, there's a nice word, it's called parakna. What do you say, Urdu? Parakna, to test something, to check something else. So we have to be parakna, we have to be checking ourselves all the time. But see, this is what this is the qualities Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned. This is the qualities that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned about that we as believers are supposed to have in our lives. Do we have these qualities in our lives? Do we have these qualities in our life or not?
Allah Ta'ala has mentioned us, our sins and guide us. Because if we don't have guidance from the Lord, if Allah Ta'ala leads us, you can be the president of any organization, an Islamic, but if you are not guided, nobody can do that. You will do what you like, it's just a matter of time. When, al-yaqeen, until you die.
حتى يأتيه اليقين.
Then you realize your faith.
So I was telling you that there are many different qualities that are mentioned in the Quran, right? Like إن الذين اتقوا إذا مسهم طائف من الشيطان تذكروا فإذا هم مبصرون. You as Muslims, you have to always look into your heart and see, have I got these qualities? To what extent do I have these qualities? To what extent have I got this quality in my life? Right? So you need to improve yourself all the time. You need to improve. You need to work on improving yourself all the time. So here also Allah Ta'ala speaks about some of, so this verse we are doing here, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ, the believers, الَّذِينَ إِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ, when Allah Ta'ala's name is mentioned, وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُم, their hearts tremble. وَإِذَا تُلِيَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُهُ, and when the signs of Allah Ta'ala is recited, زَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا, it increases them in iman. وَعَلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ, and they have placed their trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I told you, in the Quran, there are many places where qualities are mentioned of the believers. We as believers, we always seeing what progress we make in the dunya. House must be better, car must be better, income must increase, jacket must be better, pen must be better, glasses must be better. Like that, we need to see that these, what we say, laudable qualities, we term it akhlaq hamida, these qualities, to what extent do we have them in our lives? And to what extent are we improving these qualities? So in this particular verse, Allah Ta'ala mentions some qualities. So we must make intention that inshallah, whatever is mentioned here, these qualities, we are going to strive to bring them into our lives. So particular attributes of the belief. So this verse here, which is verse 2 of Surah Anfal, particular attributes of the believer described in the verses cited above are particular attributes which should be the hallmark of every believer. So these verses, these attributes we're going to be mentioned here, it should be the hallmark. What is the hallmark? Hallmark is something like, when you see that, then you recognize, like how you see there's smoke there. So if there's smoke there, what is there? There's fire there. So when you see these beautiful qualities, then you know that this is a true believer here. The outstanding feature of something. So inshallah, in this verse here, you will see the outstanding features. Allah Ta'ala will discuss the outstanding features. The hint given here is that every believer should keep checking on his or her physical and spiritual condition and assess if these attributes are present in his or her person. If they are, this calls for being grateful to Allah Ta'ala that He blessed His servant with the attributes of the true believers. So you need to tarakna, you need to check yourself all the things in your heart. You must make shukr. La in shakartum la azidannakum. That Allah Ta'ala has blessed me with these qualities, and I must strive to get more of it in my life. So if they are the cause for being grateful to Allah Ta'ala that He blessed His servant with the attributes of the true believers, and should it be that none of these attributes is present there, or is weak or feeble, despite being present, then one must either start being concerned about acquiring them or making them stronger. So now when you look in yourself and you see this is a quality which Allah Ta'ala wants from us, Allah Ta'ala speaks about in the Quran, Nabi Sallallahu speaks about in the Hadith, but to me it is found to a very, very lesser extent. It's found very weak, and you have to make effort that I need to strengthen this. Allah Ta'ala speaks about shukr, Allah Ta'ala speaks about iman, Allah Ta'ala speaks about tawakkul. Like in the verse here, we speak about trembling when you're hearing the Quran. So you have to make an effort to bring this into your life. So the first attribute in this verse, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ إِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ, the fear of Allah Ta'ala. There's the first effort. This is the first quality that's discussed. The first attribute that's described here is الَّذِينَ إِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ, those whose hearts are filled with fear when the name of Allah Ta'ala is mentioned. It means, what does this mean, that your heart is filled with fear when the name of Allah Ta'ala is mentioned? It means that the heart is soaked and brimming with the realization of Allah Ta'ala's greatness and their love for Him. So that means, what means that your hearts are trembling, that in your heart, that you have the greatness of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. That's why, there's this new thing that Muhammad Biku, they call it the Imane Mudhakara. Iman, that's why we have it in our madrasa also. Like you say, you teach your children, Subhanallah, look how beautiful the sky is today. Allah Ta'ala made the sky blue. Say, Subhanallah, this medicine doesn't cure. Allah Ta'ala gives cure, etc., etc. So I'm saying, Imani Mudhakara, to constantly remind yourself that it's the greatness of Allah Ta'ala, that it is Allah Ta'ala that does, that it is not you that do right. So that's the first thing. See, it means that the hearts are soaked and brimming with the realization of Allah Ta'ala's greatness. That Allah Ta'ala is the one that does, right? And their love for Him. The state of the heart demands that there be an attending aura of awe and fear around it. That your heart must always be filled. You must be in awe of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. This has been mentioned in another verse, and the same theme, it is mentioned in another verse of the Quran, where Allah Ta'ala says, وَبَشِّرِ الْمُحْسِنِينَ, and give glad tidings to the doers of good. Who are the doers of the good? الَّذِينَ إِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُم. Those ones, when Allah Ta'ala's name is mentioned, وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُم, their hearts are filled with awe. Their hearts are filled with fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is, give glad tidings to those humble and soft people whose hearts are filled with fear when the name of Allah Ta'ala is mentioned. This is in Surah Al-Hajj. So if you look at both of these verses, the one I said, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ إِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ, and this one here, وَبَشِّرِ الْمُحْسِنِينَ الَّذِينَ إِذَا ذُكِرَ, in both these verses identifies there is a special prerequisite of the mention, thought and remembrance of Allah Ta'ala, dhikr, which is awe and fear. So this shows us that whenever you remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, both these verses, it shows you should be in awe of Allah ta'ala. You should be in awe. So when you say Allah, 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 you take the name of Allah ta'ala, you should be in awe of the greatest. It is not an ordinary name I'm taking. This is the name of the Khaliq. This is the name of the Creator, right? So in both these verses identifies there's a very special prerequisite of the mentioned thought and remembrance of Allah ta'ala dhikr, which is awe and fear. Then in yet another verse, also in your narrator, there is a particular property of dhikrullah. There's another verse, it says, Ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub. Listen, hearts find peace through the remembrance of Allah Ta'ala. So this tells us that the fear and awe mentioned in this verse are not contrary to peace and tranquility of Allah Ta'ala. So if you correlate between the two verses, the one verse says you must be in fear and awe of Allah Ta'ala, and the other verse said that in the remembrance of Allah Ta'ala, the heart finds solace and peace. So this shows you that this fear of Allah Ta'ala that you have, it shouldn't be that fear where you fear punishment. It is a fear, it's a type of fear which you have with love, like how your own parent. You fear your parent if you do something wrong, but at the same time, you love him also, you understood? So if you put the two verses together, that is what you get. Fear of wronging somebody because of the love you have for that person, not fear of wronging somebody because of the punishment that that person will mete out to you. So that is, you marry the two verses, that is what you get. This tells us that the fear and awe mentioned in this verse are not contrary to peace and tranquility of the heart. For instance, the fear of a beast or enemy disturbs one's peace of heart. Like there's an enemy, there's a robber, there's a beast. That is a fear which, it disturbs your peace. But the fear which is generated in the heart is a result of the dhikr of Allah Ta'ala. It is totally different from that. Therefore, the word used here is not for the exact counterpart of fear. It is called wajilat. That's why if you look at the word, what's the word here? Wajilat. So wajilat, which does not, the word khawf is not mentioned, but rather wajilat is mentioned, right? Which does not mean fear in the traditional sense, right? Instead, it is the awe, a respectful feeling of fear which emerges in the heart because of the majesty of the most exalted. So it is a fear that is born out of respect and love. That is what we're speaking about, right? Some commentators have said that at this place, the mention of remembrance of Allah Ta'ala means that a person was intending to commit some sin. For example, you want to commit some sin, you want to do something wrong, but when he happened to think of Allah, it made him scared of his punishment, as a result of which he turned away from that sin. Under this situation, such fear would mean nothing but fear of punishment. So if you have to abstain from the sin purely because you fear the punishment of Allah Ta'ala, that is what we term as khawf. But the second attribute, but when you have love in your heart for Allah Ta'ala, like we said, Allah bi dhikrillah tatma'innul qulub, it is with the remembrance of Allah Ta'ala that hearts find peace. The second attribute increase. The second attribute of the believer is identified by saying, and when his verses are recited before him, they increase him in faith. وَإِذَا تُلِيَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُهُ زَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا. And when his verses are recited before him, they increase him in faith. What is the meaning of increasing faith? A meaning upon which all scholars and commentators and hadith experts agree is that Iman or faith does not increase in strength, quality, and light. It is also confirmed by experiment observation that the good deeds give strength and stability to the state of one's faith. So your Iman itself doesn't increase, but what it does, it gives you stability. It gives you strength. The heart is laid open to the acceptance of truth. that good deed becomes one's natural habit. If he leaves them, he feels the pinch and he develops himself a natural distaste for sin to the limit that he does not go even near them. So this is what increase in your iman is, that you develop a natural dislike to the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like how you develop a natural dislike to distasteful food. This is the great situation of iman, of faith, which has been identified in the hadith by the terms the sweetness of iman. وَإِذَا حَلَّتْ الْحَلَاوَةُ قَلْبًا نَشَأَتْ فِي الْعِبَادَةِ الْأَعْضَاءِ. When the sweetness of iman settles down in someone's heart, all parts of his body start relishing its place in acts of worship. So when the sweetness of iman, the greatness of iman comes into your heart, that is when you experience a ecstasy and sweetness of your actions. Okay, time is up. We will stop there. So tomorrow, inshallah, is only Tafseer. Tomorrow, no other subjects from 9 to 10. Tomorrow we'll have the Tafseer, but we'll stop there. May Allah Ta'ala accept it. May Allah Ta'ala make it a means of shifa. May Allah Ta'ala make it through the barakah of the Quran. May Allah Ta'ala make it a means of shifa and forgiveness for all of us. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallah wa bihamdika, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.